Go quick.
Ready, set, go. All right, well, I guess it's 6 o'clock. We're ready to call this meeting to order, the Co-op School Board on August 21st, 2024. My name is Kate Stoll. I am the vice chairperson this evening, sitting in for Holly Durlew Babcock. People want to go around and introduce themselves?
Linda Sherwood, Director of Business Operations.
Krista Whalen, School Board Member.
Good evening, Lauren DeGennaro, Director of Student Services.
Gina Bergstog, Assistant Superintendent.
Andy Corey, Superintendent.
I'm still Kate Stoll.
Good.
Yeah.
Rob Mann, School Board.
And Beth Williams, School Board.
Cindy Van Conant, School Board.
Tinker's High School Principal. Patrick West, Middle School Principal.
Thank you. And Tom Solon is here, but just stepped out, and Holly is not here tonight. And since Tom just stepped out, we're going to make him process observer. We'll let him know when he comes back in.
There he is.
Yep. Oh, Tom, thank you for volunteering to be process observer this evening. Appreciate it.
What happened?
My turn anyway.
Yes, that too. Holly wrote it all down for me. Do we have any agenda adjustments this evening?
Yes, I'd like to add a non-meeting at the end of our meeting because the negotiating team that has been in discussions with HESA has an update for the board. And then I'd also like to move under discussion number 7, which is the stipend committee update, to be the first item under discussion because Linda has another engagement and she would like to be here for that discussion.
Sounds good. Just remind me when I forget.
Yep.
Dive into the first one. Thanks. Okay, nominations, resignations, and correspondence.
There are no nominations, resignations. We're fully staffed right now in the co-op, so we're very excited about that. Just to let the community know, we have sent out a survey for the strategic plan. You can easily access that just by going to the SAU 41 website, and it automatically pops up, and you just click on the link. We'll be putting out hard copies in places like the library and those places for those folks who don't necessarily like to use computers or maybe don't have them. So that is off and running. The high school boiler propane project is on target and going very, very well. And lastly, if you haven't been to the high school, the back entrance is probably 98% complete. Couple minor things still to go, but you now have double doors when you come in the back entrance, a check-in window that has more of like the bank teller window like we put it in the front of the building. So those both have gone well this summer, and I'd like to thank Lance and Ben for all their efforts under facilities.
That's great. Okay, approval of the minutes from July of '24. The following amendments were offered. Page 5, line 29, replace does with doesn't. Page 7, line 6, replace though with through. Page 13, line 29, correct the spelling of board. Page 13, line 30, replace interested with interest. So I need a motion.
Do you want me to, I have 2 other, you want to put it in before you make the motion? 2 other corrections anyway.
Sure.
Page 3, line 25, replace offset with upset. And page 5, line 16, correct spelling of my name.
Correct Tom's
like a fair
name.
one.
Excellent. Okay, need a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Beth,
Second.
seconded by Cindy. Any discussion? All right. Vote?
In
Oh,
favor.
actually, I can't vote. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any noes? I'm abstaining. I wasn't here. All right, so motion carries 5-0-1. I think. Does that sound right? Cool, thanks. Look at that. Okay, 6:04. So we're a little early for public input. Should we wait?
No, we can
6
open it.
minutes, or is it okay to open?
We
Yeah?
can open it, yep.
Okay. So we're going to open public input a few minutes early, 6:05. If there was any public here, we would ask them to state their name and address for the record, and that input be focused on items included on the agenda. So we will keep public input open for 30 minutes. In the event that anybody comes in, we're going to move forward with our agenda, but we will stop at an opportune moment to allow anybody to speak. So at this point, we will keep it open until 6:35. And for now, we'll move on with the agenda.
Absolutely. Patrick, are you ready for the middle school?
Ready to go.
Excellent.
So our student open house days were this week. Monday, students came to the building starting at 9 a.m. Some parents stayed, some parents dropped their students off. We stayed open till 1 p.m. If you look back there, you'll see a whole bunch of Chromebooks. About half of our students came in on Monday and picked up their Chromebooks, walked the building, walked their schedules, tried their lockers. There were quite a few staff here, which was great to see. And so they got to meet some of their upcoming teachers and other staff in the building. It was a really great energy in the building, and just great having students back in the building, because summertime sometimes gets a little quiet. Very excited for this year. PTSA was here. They had a table. We're open again tomorrow, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. again. So any students who still want to come by and try their schedules and lockers, and parents too, come on by tomorrow, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. I highlighted ESY earlier this summer, but we ended with a barbecue, and the New Hampshire Fish and Game came by and did a nice presentation for our students and brought a whole bunch of different materials for students to really put their hands on, and it was a great way to end a great ESY again. And thank you, Catherine Ransom, and all the staff that worked ESY. Big shout out to our facilities group, our maintenance crew. They just continue to do an amazing job. The building is ready for students next week to start classes, so just wanted to give them a big shout out. Our enrollment numbers are right there. I did forget to include, we have had 4 withdrawals and 4 transfers in this summer. Sorry, I did not include that in my enrollment numbers. But we're at 370, 190 in 7th, and 180 in 8th, and then some important upcoming dates.
How are those enrollment numbers compared to recent past years?
I think they're pretty much the same in the time that I've been here. I think the 7th graders are a little bit low. I think typically, correct me if I'm wrong, we're right around 200, but in my 3 years that I've been here, we've been south of 200. So that's pretty average, but I know that the enrollment, I think, is increasing over the next few years.
Tim?
All right, we are ready for the start of another great school year up at the high school. We are planning for our staff to return on Monday, and we have freshmen coming in next Wednesday for their typical orientation day. It will just be a half day, and then all students start next Thursday. As Andy mentioned, a handful of renovations going on in the building right now, including the back lobby. We've got some really nice granite steps that access the upper athletic field adjacent to the turf field. Athletics are underway at the high school. The building has come alive once again with students. We opened parking, so that's always a popular item. Chromebooks are being distributed starting tomorrow, and that'll go on until the start of school. Hopefully, students will start the school year off with those in hand. We had our new hire orientation today, or yesterday and today, I should say. And we also had our building leadership team planning meeting earlier this week. So we are ready to go. You can see here I have listed our enrollment figures. Tom, to answer your question, they are in line. Even since last week, this date was 8/15, these numbers were accurate. It has changed just slightly since. I think it's come down just a couple, but then I think I signed one today that we had a student transferring in. So it's slightly off of that number, but hovering right around 770 is what we're projecting to be at to start the school year, which is on pace for the last 2 years where we dipped below 800 2 years ago. So staffing updates. We are in the final stages of hiring. Andy had mentioned the office space upstairs outside the back lobby there. We had added a staff member to monitor that entrance to the building. So we are hiring someone to fill another support staff position. We've got some internal movement, so it won't be that position necessarily, but we are in the final stages of hiring someone to fill that role.
Which contract does that person fall under?
HESA. Yep. We have our open house date listed at the bottom there as important dates coming up. That's September 12th. There'll be plenty of information coming out at the start of the school year, so I'll be communicating with families via Parent Square in the coming days about all the stuff that lies ahead in the coming days and weeks. And I saw later on there's discussion about the New Orleans trip. But other than that, I'm open to comments and questions as always. Yes.
Are you gonna cover Brian, or is it Patrick?
I was gonna whiz through that.
Okay,
Great.
We're ready? Okay, can't believe it's start of another athletic season. Football started Friday, August 16th, while all other sports started this past Monday. Student athletes at HBMS will start the first day of school, which is next Thursday, August 29th. Registrations are showing strong, and those numbers will be provided in the September board packet. While there's no shortage of sports in the summer, it is great to have the buzz of the fall season starting back up. Impact testing was held Monday this week during our open house, but it looks like there's also Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week at the high school. But we've started our impact testing for our middle school students this week. Mark your calendars. Homecoming weekend coincides with the New Hampshire Tackles Hunger Campaign, scheduled for Friday, October 4th and Saturday, October 5th, with all games happening on the turf field and culminating homecoming dance for the football game on Saturday, October 5th. A full schedule of events will be posted on the athletics website, and there are still some opening coaching positions at the high school, a couple at the middle school, and there are some recent hires at the bottom.
thank you, Patrick.
Of course.
This is where we were going to move the stipend piece, so
Yep, thank you.
I'll turn it over to Gina.
Excellent.
Okay, so I'm going to share with you a chart that might be a little bit clearer to read. Can you take what you pass it down?
The stipend committee update.
No.
What is this?
This is last year's, the committee is for next year's.
No, I'm just, obviously, trying to figure out.
This was the number 7 under discussion, Tom, that we had moved up.
That stipend committee update, but it's not really the committee update.
Correct, it's a stipend update.
Okay, so
Yes, I do.
he doesn't share well. Sorry, so a couple of changes with this and the one in the board packet. This one has some of the changes that we had put in the FY25 budget. They've been moved or added, so those were already approved, but now you see them in the respective tier. Also, some of the stipends had been split, but now they're more distinguished as like 1 and 2, meaning there are 2 of those stipends for 2 different employees. So also on the top, it says Tier 1. Let's start with that one. Tier 1 had been $400. The 1% of base is $515.03. So that is certainly an increase. But if you, Linda ran some numbers, and if you look at all of the stipends that we would pay out at a different rate, if you were to go with a percentage movement, the total addition would be, and this is plus or minus because we might not fill them, et cetera, but about $13,000, which is more than what we are able to cover based on changes to our coaches who we've hired and which coaches have left based on the fact that coaches we were paying on a tiered system, so we had budgeted assuming that our coaches would return, but if they've departed, then we then start off at the lower rate. so we can manage this budget-wise. The idea that I had, one, was that we wouldn't have to have those annual conversations just about not only just the squeaky wheel type thing, but also incremental changes that we could budget and plan for regularly. And, you know, one of the goals that I heard last year from the board was trying to foster and enhance relationships between adults in the building and our students. And while some of these positions have been filled by our teachers, many of them are filled from community members and parents, and we're trying to find a way to foster those relationships with the adults that are in our building, our teachers, and giving them a percentage, which is certainly an increase, but also there's that sense that there's movement over time as opposed to a stagnant stipend that hasn't been changed in a few years. That was the intent of the shift. And so if there are specific questions that haven't been answered with, given the additional information of the prior dollar amount to what it would be if you were to approve this, and the total dollar amount, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Or if this was not approved, would the first number be what applies, or would some of them, they're in a tiered system, right?
No, just the coaches. So these are non-coaching advisory positions and advisor positions, and so it's just that first dollar amount.
So does this only apply to the non-coaching positions?
Correct. Yep.
And the coaching positions are being suggested to be kept where they are?
Where they've been for the past few years, which has been a tiered approach.
Right.
Yep.
Is that the long-term goal, or is there an expectation that the coaches may be evaluated in the same context as this?
So my understanding is that the stipend committee will tackle that based on information gathered by the coaches and the advisors and what makes sense. I like the tiered approach, but it didn't make sense for these positions necessarily. And so I thought a different approach might, now, the 1% or 2% doesn't necessarily make sense for coaching. Maybe it does. I don't know. But that's something for the committee to decide and spend time together looking at data, and can meet annually and propose a different scenario in year 2 or 3, et cetera.
Are the differences between the tiers, is the metric the amount of time that is required? Is there any other metric that you?
Just after I departed as a teacher, but
Oh.
founded on, one of the final things I did, because I was a student council advisor, and we wanted to look at all of the system, why Spanish Club had this stipend and why others had a different one. So what we looked at was how many students were participating, how often were your meetings, how many outside of school competitions or those types of things were involved, how, is there a level of recognition involved if it brought the school funding or anything like that. All of those were taken into consideration. Now the stipend committee can do whatever they want and look at different factors, but I know a survey was developed that really looked at how many students are we talking about, is it for fall or is it a year-long commitment? And, are there competitions, out-of-school requirements, all of those things.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
What are we being asked to do with this tonight?
So I would love to know, yes or no, whichever way you vote, if you would approve the proposal of the percentage of base for FY25, so we can issue contracts for all of our advisors, starting next week.
To approve both the structure and the assignment of roles within the table?
So the assignment of roles within the table has already been approved by you throughout the years, and any movements were individually identified in, new item spreadsheet over the course of the year. So that has already been there. The tier system was already there. The only true shift here is the shift from a flat dollar amount to a percentage. So I'm looking for approval of that, essentially the $13,000.
One reason I'm asking is, last meeting I asked a question about the interaction problem. And I got a fairly lengthy response back. I'm not sure, I know you were copied too. I'm not sure who else, from Matt Barbosa. And apparently there is I don't know whether it's a formal request or where it is in the process, but there is a request that an adjustment, at least to the choral director, I'm not sure if the musical director, well, I think it's just a choral director, be made, and I'm wondering if that is something that can or should be taken up at this point in time. Did you get copied on it, Gina?
So, yeah, and I apologize. I had a ton of notes on this for June, and then I thought I scanned my notes and recycled, but apparently I went straight to recycle. So I had to try to recreate them. And now that you mention it, I do remember seeing that. But where these numbers came from are both the original table and then what we actually have paid out. I understood the request. Typically, those go through the budget process, but let me see.
I guess
Yeah.
if we are going to talk about it, I would certainly like to get input from the administrator on it, and anyone else who has awareness of the request and can provide additional info.
Sure. So the choral director, historically, from our budget records, has been paid at tier 8. And I think the request was to match the band director at tier 10. And there was a justification involved. Other than what he's shared in that email, which Tim shared with me, I can't speak to any of what, I really don't know much about the hours involved. I mean, I know what I see in our, when I'm made aware of, but I'm not intimately involved in it as Tim was. So typically that would go to Tim, and then that would be part of the budgeting process. I would only have moved it if that was an error on my part and I put it in the wrong box. But that's not, I mean, it had been paid out as tier 8.
Right, so the choral director on this one is listed in tier 5, which I think. It's 2 places. It's 2 places,
Yeah, the high school is at tier 5.
but it's also listed in the tier 8 down below. So I think that might just be.
Oh, that is, so the
That
tier
was
5 was
the-
the error, yeah. Okay,
Strike tier 5.
strike tier 5, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, but because I just double checked what we actually paid last year, and it was the tier 8. So if he's asking for tier 8, that is where it belongs. That's my clerical error.
And for those who, again, I apologize, I couldn't recall the copy of the policy was gonna get handled. But the basic gist of it was that over the last several years, the amount of external activities, performances, the scope of the chorus's activities have increased significantly, and in the opinion of Mr. Barbosa, are on par with that of the band. And as such, he would making the case that he should receive the same stipend as the band director does. And I don't have a position to dispute it. I just appreciate getting the input. And what I'm trying to understand is whether or not that question, number one, is open to discussion for this coming school year.
Sure.
And if so, should that be addressed in the same conversation we're having about pay structure
Sure.
in general?
Okay, so I would think that the most appropriate way to move forward, because typically somebody would approach the principal in June about that exact thing. They feel that this needs to be moved for this reason, but not everyone does that. So that's why the committee one great reason why the committee is here is because then it sort of sends information, requests information, rather than hoping for a squeaky wheel. But then that, let's say Tim agrees and says, absolutely, I should move it to tier 10, then he would put that in the July budget for the following year. So if he brought that forward in May, June, that would be for consideration of the following year. So I feel it should stay in tier 8. That doesn't mean that in the conversation of the stipend committee on the side, that they could make a recommendation to shift one because they determined it was totally out of whack. And we could, agree to pay tier 10 for that one. We could look at the data and then support that or whatever in the September, October
Yeah.
meeting.
With it on an exception basis?
Correct. And then, so we can move forward with all the advisors and then look at that individually
I like
as
that
the
better.
committee.
I like that better.
But separate from this conversation.
Yeah.
Yep, I would agree.
So we'll leave that out of this conversation tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
When was the last time these stipends have been changed? Has it been a while?
Look at annually.
They're looked at annually, but it's really, I think last year, or for the FY25 budget, Patrick brought forward maybe 5 additions, but typically it's 1 or 2 are looked at and an adjustment is made per year. So holistically, an adjustment, the tier levels have been the same for the existence of the tier system 10,
Okay.
15 years ago.
Wow, okay.
We adjusted the pay on them within the last, I think, 5 years or so, but
Not since I've been in this role.
that I don't know.
No, I'm,
But what's happened, Rob, is historically, it's been dealt with as someone making an observation on a particular position, saying either we can't fill it, and we're not paying enough, or someone saying, I'm doing all this work, and I think it should get paid more, and the way that has happened is, there's been a proposal that comes from the building administrator to move it to a different tier, move that position to a different tier. Through the last negotiating session, we agreed outside of the contract, because we don't want to have this structure as part of the negotiating contract, because it
No.
affects people beyond, anyway. We agreed to form a committee, and the object of the committee will be, as Gina described, to have a more structured approach with defined membership, people who look at it, and will actively procure, receive
Yeah.
input on.
So now it's process-based rather than a event provoking a conversation. So now we have a standing committee, they're looking at it, and we'll continue to look at it, and
Our policy
comes
has
to us.
always required us to review it, I shouldn't say, has, for the past several years, required us to look at it and approve continually, but we haven't had a process to really examine potential changes.
I see. So this is governed by policy of some sort. Okay.
And essentially, this is
Perfect.
going to allow for small raises that hopefully will be incentive to keep them in the
I like
position
it.
and keep those advisors in the school versus having to look outside
Yeah.
of the school. Makes sense.
So, are we deliberating on this separately?
It's scheduled under deliberations.
I move it, you want to deliberate now?
so that
or-
Linda knows the result.
That would be nice, then Linda would know the result so that she can start working on the contracts. So if it's all right with the chair,
It's your agenda.
I'm so easy to go with that. Sure. Wait, I have to find it.
It's the third deliberative item.
I have to find it.
Yeah.
I'll move to
You're just gonna do it, aren't you?
the extracurricular stipend table, 2024, 2025, as distributed
Presented.
tonight with the correction of removing choral director from the tier 5 location.
Second?
Any additional discussion?
The discussion is, I just want to thank you for putting this together. I know a lot of people had hand in, but bringing all the information in one place, because this is really what we needed to see. Thank you.
Agreed.
All right, is nothing else? Shall we vote? All right, all those in favor? I think
Thank you.
that's everybody? Any noes? All right, that's 6-0.
Thank you, Linda.
Great, thank you.
Next is I just wanted to keep this on the agenda so it stays at the forefront of the board. It's the Articles of Agreement. We are looking at a potential change in the articles regarding bond and lease payments and availability to use each of those as a borrowing source. It is not for action tonight, but we'd like to talk about it in September and/or October, and potentially put it as a January special meeting. So that would be the big conversation for the board. We've found that it's much better to take anything with the Articles of Agreement via a special meeting, because when we get to the annual meeting, there are so many other things, it's very difficult. So I just wanted to keep that at the forefront of your thought process, and that'll come back to you in September to see what action you'd like to take. A, if you'd like to even consider making that adjustment, and then B, if so, when in January would you like to have a meeting? Thank you. Any questions for that? Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Tim. This second item, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, was another item that the board had asked to keep on for the foreseeable future to discuss. So Tim is just going to give the board some kind of overview of his thoughts now that we've had the data presented. And then I know he is planning meetings with his student council and various components in the school to then come back and give you more of what I'll say a concrete thought process of where he'd like to go. So I'll turn it over to you, Tim.
Thank you. So as Andy mentioned, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey was discussed at length in the most recent board meeting. Since then, I have met with, on multiple occasions, our advisory leadership team, but within those meetings, we had also discussed the concept of incorporating programming into advisory to address some of the trends and concerns that we saw in the survey. I've also, although it is summer, we do have counselor summer days, and I met with our assistant principal of student services and our department chair of school counseling to discuss the raw data and planning to share this information with our school counselors upon return next week. From there, we have also we have preliminary plans for a student leadership retreat in early October, similar to what we did last year. We take a group of student leaders from throughout the building, throughout a variety of different clubs and activities, not just student council, but it is student council students as well, but student leaders from throughout the building, from throughout many of the clubs that you just saw on that spreadsheet, and we take them off-site, and one of the agenda items that day will be to review a number of different issues that we've identified within the Youth Risk Behavior Survey to incorporate some student input into a response and how we can meet student needs and how we can support them in curbing some of those risky behaviors. So we'll incorporate student leadership into the response to that data, and the vehicle for that, one of the vehicles for that will be our advisory program, planning probably second term towards middle of the school year, where we'll start to incorporate some of the programming based on student feedback, in addition to our school council and department's input. We'll also utilize our SIT team. Our SIT team is our school counseling and administration and sometimes special education teachers to identify some systems of behavioral support that we can again incorporate maybe more on a tier 2 level, not necessarily a tier 1 in advisory that everybody gets, but maybe identify some more specific needs for smaller groups of students. So that's where we're at in the planning. I think we're set up for success, and especially anytime you incorporate the student perspective, I think we're going to end up in a good spot.
6:35. And this is most likely to be on upcoming agendas again, as we give.
I was just going to ask that.
Yep.
When a good appropriate time, when you have a little bit of mileage behind you and some of this, I'd love to hear
Yep.
how things are going, maybe
Yeah, I
in the
think-
new calendar year.
I'd
some
love
point.
the idea, and I think involving maybe our student rep in that process as well, I think. would
Love
be,
to hear it.
Can be thoughtful.
Yeah, no, I think it's great to get the idea of getting it involved in advisory, building lessons into advisory, and figuring out how to get some of that message involved, and even the importance of taking a survey like this and helping students understand that how they answer a survey like this, for better or for worse, can really affect other students. That if they're answering it well, it's going to affect students, and if they don't answer it well, it's going to affect students. And so sort of learning around that, survey taking and response is so doing that in smaller groups, and having the ability to talk about those things over time in a smaller group setting, I think will make a big difference. So,
I also like keeping the conversation going and keeping the engagement,
Yeah.
and with students looking at it, thinking about it, and giving input over an extended period of time instead of a one and done. It doesn't have the impact, in my point of view. I think that extended conversation keeps the engagement, keeps people thinking about it, so.
yeah, it's awesome. I saw this was on here. I watched last month's meeting. I wasn't here, but it's summertime, so I wasn't sure how much would actually get done in 4 weeks. So I'm glad that you've been able to talk to a lot of people. It's awesome.
Thanks for. Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
I talked to him the other day.
Quickly, before we jump into anything else, we are going to close public input at 6:37 p.m.
The next item, again, is kind of to keep it on the front burner for the board. With the transition from me retiring and Gina coming on board, each of the three boards have to consider and offer feedback on what they'd like to do for an evaluation process. You really have three options. You can use the short form with me, you can use the long form, if you so choose, or you could do no evaluation. I've been providing feedback. I think the long form, in all honesty, may be time to go back to policy and kind of just look at the melding between the long and the short, because I think the short form is serving us well, and I don't think it's missing a lot. So that's something we can discuss at the governing board about sending that back to policy. In terms of the short form this year, I know we table it the short form, but it's an awful lot of work for the board. And when I look at what's going on in the transition, knowing that by that point in the year, which is February typically, we'll have the strategic plan completed and kind of approved and voted on. And I personally think there might be more benefit to having a discussion with the superintendent-elect on kind of goals and visions for the upcoming year. Now, we could do that through two means. We could do it through my evaluation, which I've always shared with Gina, so that we know what the goals and objectives are, or we could do it through more just a board, almost like retreat seminar for a few hours where we just discuss goals and objectives for that fall and where we're going, because by then we could have potentially named a new assistant superintendent, depending on how that process goes. And this board may not be aware, but we do have a retirement of a Brookline principal at CSDA, is retiring in June. So there'll be some new people in the leadership piece, so I think there might be a benefit for that. There was no action intended tonight. It was more that each board would discuss and become, I'll say, prepped to the governing board in October. But obviously, any questions or comments or thoughts are most welcome, and we'll continue to take notes.
I just wanted to add to that, that part of what this is, at the last governing board meeting, there was a discussion about updating, specifically the long form, but it could morph into a conversation about consolidation. The request was that all board members take time to look at the long form, remind themselves of what it is. Who is our rep to?
Cindy.
And then we want to give feedback to
Right.
Cindy, because the governing board policy committee
Right.
is going to be reviewing that long form and possibly updating it and editing it. So the idea was, it was really important for people who have never gone through the process.
Right.
But even for those of us who have, it's worth taking a look at it and seeing whether or not there are any adjustments, changes, deletions, whatever. One of the things that I don't think people really understood, who haven't gone through it, was the how to use the non-applicable or for something that some people may have awareness of and other people don't. We didn't want to take things off at that
Right.
point. We've gone through a couple of sessions of having that option, so the question was, is that an effective way of soliciting input while still giving people the ability to essentially say not applicable to them? It's not that it's not applicable. So it's going to be, Holly said it's going to be on, this is going to be on the agenda again
Correct.
in September. I don't know whether she will want to take a roll-up and formally deliver it to Cindy, or how that will happen. But the idea is
Yep.
we all can take this opportunity to provide input to the governing board policy committee, who are going to be reviewing and potentially revising the forms as part of the SU governing board policy.
Correct.
So my question actually was, when is policy meeting again, and when are they looking for input from all the boards? Do you know?
Carol is the vice, so she's the one that runs the
Yeah.
eval. So I haven't heard anything from her, but it is summer, so I'm assuming
Okay.
that in September, we'll try to have at least a Zoom meeting or something to try to get everybody. My comment at the SAU meeting the last time was, we only have 4 meetings, so when you start trying to revise a
Right.
policy, you don't have very much time to do it. So we really should have something by October. It'll be a rough draft, but at least it would be something. And, the conversation at the meeting was, we have so many new people that they, wanted to go ahead and do the form. But I think that the electronic way, they can still do it. We've all been new trying to do the form. So I'm not sure that we really need to do anything with Andy on his way out. I think I like the discussion that he had, he said about having a discussion instead of really doing the whole form. It does take a lot of time for the board chairs. Between kind of having to nudge everybody to get it done, and then sometimes we don't get everybody's response, and then trying to roll it up, and it is time consuming. And if we have a couple other things, possibly a special meeting or something in January, that's time consuming as well. So I'll wait to hear from Carol. If I don't hear from her by the time school starts, I'll reach out to her.
Okay.
One of the things that Andy brought up is his review, and this is just my opinion, but knowing the function of the review, I think that to do a traditional review of him would not be a benefit to anyone. I think the idea of maybe having a discussion, I think this exists with the superintendent-elect, has value, but I don't know that it needs to be a formal process, so that would free us up in January meeting?
Yeah.
February.
February meeting,
February meeting.
when we would normally have that marathon session to crank out the review, we could use that to perhaps look at any edits to the policy
Yeah.
regarding that, which would give you and the policy committee a longer period. So I think it's worth us having that conversation in October. Is that an acceptable process? But that would give you literally a couple of months to work on edits and then bring it back.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
February typically is not a policy at all because of this, so that would actually give one more meeting for the SAU group to talk about policy.
So, again, my expectation is that Holly will have this topic on the agenda next month with the goal of receiving input from us regarding the policy, as the forms as it currently exists.
Yeah, I agree. I think having a normal, formal review process in this year of transition has no value. And I don't necessarily think that having new members drive that process, I don't support. However, the individual districts, if they have members that want to do it, they can do a blank run within their district and, do what they want, fill it out, give it to their chair, and that's as far as it goes. Because I do not support moving that work product to their targets, which is their superintendent. So, and/or assistant superintendent, because we need that year to review. It hasn't happened yet.
You can't review the assistant superintendent as a superintendent review.
Agreed. So I think it's going to, however, I think it's essential that we think about talking about goals. And actually, the board should, if we have expectations, that is the time to communicate those expectations because it's going to set up the next cycle. And this is an ideal time to do the revamp and the review of the evaluations because we're not doing one. So this is, the time is now to look at that and go deep on it.
Yeah, I agree. I said that at the last SAU meeting, that I didn't think we needed to do one. But it sounds like maybe we need to come ready to talk about the long form at the next meeting.
Can I interrupt 1 second? Joe, could you just check on the live stream? I had a text from a community member that it's not running. What?
It's up on my end.
Okay,
I can restart it, just to make sure.
thank you very much, Joe. The next piece is, we have an update on Title IX